Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The grand ballroom buzzed with energy. It was the event of the year, the annual art auction where the richest of the rich came to show off their wealth and taste. The most influential collectors, the most famous critics, and the most established names in the world of art were all gathered in one place. Yet, despite the extravagant decor, the polished marble floors, and the air of exclusivity, the room had an unmistakable sense of tension. The auctioneer, a man with a voice as smooth as velvet, called out to the crowd. His tone was warm, inviting, but there was an edge of urgency to it, as if he knew that the evening had to be perfect. As he took his place behind the podium, his sharp eyes scanned the crowd, anticipating the bids that would come. But amidst all the poised faces, there was one that stood out, not for its elegance, but for its simplicity. In the back of the room, standing near the towering columns, was a woman. She was a picture of quiet solitude, dressed in a simple, dark dress that could have been bought at any modest store. Her shoes were worn, her hair neatly tied back in a low ponytail. She was in stark contrast to the vibrant, expensive attire of the others around her. It was clear she didn't belong. Her name was Eleanor Harper. She wasn't a celebrity, an heiress, or even someone with vast wealth. She had been an artist all her life, but her paintings had never been recognized in the way they deserved. She had grown accustomed to the rejection, to the dismissive looks from gallery owners, to the words whispered behind her back. The art world, as she had come to know it, was not for people like her. But tonight, she was here, against all odds. Her eyes, however, were not focused on the people around her. They were fixed on the stage, where the auctioneer was now preparing to showcase the next piece. Eleanor's heart beat faster with every second that passed. She had tried to calm her nerves, but the anticipation kept building. Her fingers fidgeted with the rolled-up canvas in her hands. She couldn't help but wonder how it would feel to have her work up there, on the grand stage, under the spotlight. The crowd was settling into their seats, the low murmurs dying down as the auctioneer prepared to introduce the next painting. And then, it was time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now pleased to present a work of art that we are sure you will find most intriguing, the auctioneer began. He flashed a bright smile as he gestured to the large canvas now covered by a thick velvet cloth. This piece is by an unknown artist, a fresh talent whose work is only just beginning to be recognized. We are fortunate to be showcasing it here tonight. Eleanor's stomach lurched. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life, and now, it was happening. She knew her painting might not be like the others, it wasn't a carefully curated piece created for high society, nor was it made with the intention to impress. It was simple. Raw. Honest. The auctioneer tugged at the cloth, and as it fell away, Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her painting, her life's work, stood bare before the crowd. It was an abstract piece, a swirl of vibrant colors, dark blues, and fiery oranges, capturing a moment of emotional chaos. It wasn't perfect, but it held meaning. She had poured everything into that canvas, the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the heartache of unfulfilled dreams. There was silence at first, an uncomfortable pause. Eleanor's pulse raced. She could already feel the judgmental eyes of the crowd on her. A few whispered words drifted her way. Is that supposed to be art? Looks like a mess of colors. No technique, no structure. Why is this even here? Eleanor clenched her jaw. She had heard it all before, the dismissive remarks, the laughter, the underhanded comments. The art world was not kind to those who didn't conform to its unspoken rules. And yet, here she was. The auctioneer, a man in his early 50s, cleared his throat, his attempt to regain control of the room. He was trying to mask the awkwardness, but it was clear from the frown on his face that the reception wasn't what he had expected. Still, he smiled and called out, "Starting bid for this unique piece is $1,000. $1,000, who will start the bidding?" A ripple of disbelief swept through the crowd. Eleanor could feel the stares on her back as the whispers grew louder. No one was taking the auction seriously. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She knew that this moment was bigger than just the money, it was the validation she had longed for. She had created this painting for herself, for the world to see. No matter how much they mocked it, she was proud of what she had made. The auctioneer looked out over the room, awaiting a response. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but there was no movement. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, a man in the front row, wearing a tailored suit and a smirk that screamed arrogance, raised his paddle with a flourish. "I'll bid $1, he said loudly, his voice dripping with condescension. The laughter of the crowd followed, like a ripple of electricity passing through them. The auctioneer tried to regain his composure, but the damage was already done. The room was now filled with snickers and mocking glances. Eleanor felt the heat rise to her face, but she kept her head high, refusing to show how much it hurt. $1, the auctioneer repeated, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. "Very well, do I hear two?" No one moved. The man with the $1 bid leaned back in his chair, grinning as if he had won some small victory. Eleanor's hands tightened around the rolled canvas. But then, something strange happened. A different voice broke through. The mockery, cutting through the laughter like a blade. "I'll bid $2,000. The room fell silent. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. A new bidder had entered the game, and this wasn't just some anonymous mocker. This voice was serious. The crowd turned to look at the new bidder, an older man, in a sharp tuxedo, who sat with his chin slightly raised, an air of quiet confidence around him. $2,000, going once, the auctioneer called out, his eyes widening as the bidding continued. The tension in the room shifted, and the initial mockery began to fade. People now watched with interest as the price went up in increments, $4,000, $6,000, $10,000, each new bid more surprising than the last. As the auctioneer continued to call out the bids, Eleanor's thoughts blurred. She couldn't believe it. The painting that had been mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed just moments before was now commanding serious money. But as the auctioneer's voice rang out, Eleanor knew the truth. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about the bids. It was about something much deeper. Something that only a select few would understand. And that, she realized, was why she had painted this piece in the first place. It wasn't for the people who mocked her, or for the critics who would never understand. It was for the ones who could see past the surface. The ones who would truly appreciate what she had created. The bidding soared, and the audience grew restless. What started as a joke had now become the talk of the event. The room had shifted, Eleanor had become the center of attention, the object of curiosity and disbelief. What had begun as mockery was now a story that no one would forget. The painting, she realized, was worth more than she had ever imagined. But the true value lay in what it represented: resilience, belief in herself, and the courage to stand firm in the face of ridicule. The moment she had walked into that room, she had been written off. But she wasn't going anywhere. This was just the beginning. Eleanor Harper stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. $2,000. The bid had come from nowhere, shattering the mockery that had filled the room moments before. The laughter from the front row died down as the room shifted its focus, all eyes now on her and the mysterious new bidder. Her heart was still racing. She tried to steady her breath, but the words of the auctioneer echoed in her ears. $2,000, going once, going twice, sold. The gavel struck down with authority, and before she could fully comprehend the gravity of the moment, the auctioneer turned towards her. "Congratulations, Miss Harper. Your painting has been sold for $2,000. He said the words with a mix of surprise and forced cheerfulness, clearly trying to salvage some form of dignity after the earlier ridicule. The crowd's murmurs were a blend of admiration, curiosity, and disbelief. Eleanor blinked, her gaze fixed on the canvas that had just been purchased by the man in the tuxedo. As the auctioneer moved on to the next piece, Eleanor didn't hear him. The room seemed to swirl around her, blurring into an indistinct haze. The reality of what had just happened was too much to grasp. The shame, the ridicule, the sneers, they had all been wiped away with a single, unexpected bid. $2,000, she whispered to herself, as though speaking the number aloud would help her understand the significance of it. Her hands shook as she clutched her purse. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It was fragile, almost fragile enough to break, but it was there. And it was hers. She had stood in that room, ignored and laughed at, but she had survived the storm. She had kept her head high, never once letting them see her falter. And now her work had been recognized. A tap on her shoulder brought her back to reality. "Miss Harper?" The voice was low, measured, with an unmistakable air of authority. Eleanor turned around to see the man who had bid on her painting. He was standing behind her, a slight smile on his face, his tuxedo sharply cut, his dark hair neatly combed. There was something about him, something that made him stand apart from the others in the room. He exuded power without trying, a quiet confidence that was almost unsettling. "Yes?" Eleanor's voice came out softer than she intended, the sudden surge of emotion making it hard for her to speak. "I'm Daniel Carrington," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "I was the one who placed the bid on your painting." Eleanor hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. "Thank you," she managed to say, still in disbelief. "It's not just about the painting, Miss Harper," Daniel continued, his voice rich with intrigue. "It's about you." Eleanor frowned, unsure of how to respond. "I don't understand." Daniel smiled slightly, a knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Let's take a walk. I'd like to talk to you about something." He gestured towards the back of the room, where a quieter, more private hallway led away from the main event. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, torn between her instinct to retreat and the undeniable pull of curiosity. After a moment's pause, she nodded. The two of them walked through the large ballroom, the laughter and chatter fading as they moved further into the quiet hallway. Daniel led her to a small, dimly lit room at the back of the building. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the auction room. The walls were adorned with minimalist artwork, and the air felt heavy with a sense of mystery. He closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit. Eleanor took a seat on the plush velvet couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. "I've been following your work for a while." "Miss Harper," Daniel began, his voice smooth but serious. "And I have to say, I'm impressed. Most artists go their entire careers without ever reaching the level of depth and emotion you've captured in your work. You've got a rare gift." Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. "You've been following my work?" Her voice trembled slightly, the shock of hearing such praise making it hard to keep her composure. "But, no one knows who I am. I'm just another struggling artist." Daniel shook his head, a soft laugh escaping him. "Far from it. You're not just another artist, Eleanor. You have something special. Something that's rare. The world has missed it, but I won't." Eleanor was speechless. She had spent so long fighting for validation, for recognition, but now, hearing it from a man who had just bid millions on her work, she wasn't sure how to process it. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you be interested in me? In my painting?" Daniel's expression softened. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "Because there's more to your painting than meets the eye. And there's more to you than you even realize." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just an art collector, Miss Harper," he said, his tone growing more serious. I've been involved in the art world for a long time. I know things about paintings, about artists, that most people don't. And I've learned that sometimes, the most valuable works of art come from the least expected places. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known there was something different about her painting, the way it captured emotion, the way it told a story without words, but to hear it from him, someone who clearly knew the ins and outs of the art world, it made her feel like her work had a hidden depth that even she had yet to fully understand. "What are you trying to say?" she asked, her voice now tinged with both fear and curiosity. "There's something in that painting," Daniel said softly. "Something hidden. A message. I believe it's more than just a beautiful work of art. It's a piece of a much bigger puzzle, Eleanor. And I want to help you uncover it." For a moment, Eleanor sat still, her mind spinning. She had never thought of her work in this way. It was simply her outlet, her way of dealing with the world and her own emotions. But now, hearing Daniel's words, she realized that perhaps her painting was something more. Something powerful. Something that others might want to exploit. "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "What could be hidden in my painting?" Daniel smiled, but this time, there was no humor in it. "It's not about what you see on the surface, Eleanor. It's about what you're too afraid to look at." Her heart began to race again as Daniel leaned in closer. "There are people who would kill to get their hands on that painting. People who would stop at nothing to uncover its secrets." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this. She had thought that the world of high society art auctions was about recognition, fame, and money. But now, she was learning that there were darker forces at play, forces she didn't fully understand. What do you mean?" she stammered. Daniel paused, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'll explain everything soon. But for now, all you need to know is this: you've just stepped into a much bigger game. And it's a game that could change everything for you. But you have to be careful, Eleanor. Not everyone who's interested in your work has good intentions." Eleanor's head spun. The room seemed to close in around her, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. For the first time, she wondered if she was in over her head. Eleanor's mind was racing. She had left the small, private room where she had spoken with Daniel Carrington, the man who had purchased her painting for millions. Her thoughts were a tangled mess of confusion and curiosity, her pulse still quick from the encounter. She had never expected anything like this. One minute, she was a struggling artist, trying to make a name for herself. The next, she was thrust into a world of hidden messages, powerful people, and dangerous games. As she walked through the grand hallway of the auction house, she tried to steady her breath, but it felt impossible. She had heard the words Daniel had spoken, his offer to help her uncover something hidden in her painting, but what did they really mean? What could be so significant about a simple abstract piece she had painted in a small apartment, far from the glamorous world of high society? Her fingers brushed against the cool surface of the marble walls as she made her way toward the exit. The auction was still in full swing, the sound of bids echoing in the background, but Eleanor felt a world away from it all. The laughter and whispers of the guests, the clinking of champagne glasses, all of it seemed distant. She felt out of place, caught between two worlds, the one she had always known and the one that was unfolding before her. She stepped outside into the cool evening air, the quiet of the night a stark contrast to the chaos she had just left behind. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but they felt foreign to her now. Everything felt foreign. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her from her thoughts. She pulled it out to find a message from her closest friend, Emma. "Eleanor, I saw the auction results. 2 million. Can you believe it? You're going to be famous. Call me when you can, I'm dying to hear everything." Eleanor smiled weakly, her fingers hovering over the screen. Emma had always been supportive, always the one to cheer her on when things felt bleak. But right now, Eleanor didn't feel like celebrating. Something wasn't right. She didn't know what it was yet, but the conversation with Daniel had left her with a sense of unease. I need to think, she thought to herself as she typed a quick response. I'll call you later, I just need some time to process everything. She hit send and slipped the phone back into her pocket, deciding she needed to clear her head. The street outside the auction house was buzzing with activity as people hurried home, but Eleanor walked in the opposite direction, her feet taking her to a quiet park nearby. She needed solitude, a place to gather her thoughts without the noise of the world. The park was nearly empty, save for a few joggers and a man walking his dog. She found a bench under a large oak tree and sat down, the cool breeze brushing her hair away from her face. The city felt far away here, as though she had entered a different realm altogether. It was peaceful, and for the first time that evening, Eleanor felt a small sense of calm. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet wash over her. But her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel, to his cryptic words. There's something in that painting, a message, hidden. What message? What had she created that could be so important? She had simply painted what she felt, a swirl of colors that spoke to her in ways words never could. But now, it seemed that what she had created was something more than just a piece of art. It was a key to something bigger, something dangerous. She leaned back on the bench, staring up at the sky as her mind continued to race. She couldn't help but replay Daniel's words over and over again. You've stepped into a much bigger game, Eleanor. And it's a game that could change everything for you. What was he talking about? Was it just a ploy to manipulate her into revealing more about herself, or was there some truth to what he was saying? She didn't know who to trust anymore. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call from Emma. Eleanor hesitated for a moment before answering. Eleanor. Emma's voice came through, full of excitement. I can't believe it. $2 million. You're going to be rich, famous, everything you've ever dreamed of. This is amazing. Eleanor smiled faintly but felt a knot in her stomach. Yeah, it's amazing, she said quietly, trying to match Emma's enthusiasm. Tell me everything. What's next? Are you going to have your own gallery show? Do interviews? I'm sure everyone will want to talk to you. Eleanor looked around the park, as if the answers were hidden in the shadows of the trees. I don't know, Emma. I don't think I'm ready for all this. Something feels off. What do you mean? It's a dream come true. I know, but, Eleanor paused, trying to find the right words. There's more to it than I thought. I met the guy who bought my painting, Daniel Carrington. He's not just a buyer, he's involved in the art world in ways I didn't even know existed. And he says there's something hidden in my painting. A message. Something important. A long silence followed before Emma spoke again, her voice tinged with concern. What kind of message? Are you sure he's not just trying to manipulate you? I mean, $2 million is a lot of money. People get weird when they're around money. I don't know, Eleanor admitted, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over her. He's not like the others. There's something about him. I don't know if I can trust him, but I can't shake the feeling that this is bigger than just a sale. Emma's voice softened. Eleanor, I know you've always been careful, but this sounds like an opportunity of a lifetime. You've worked so hard for this. Don't let it slip away because of some vague warning. I don't know what to do, Eleanor whispered, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. I've always been an outsider in the art world. Now, I feel like I'm being pulled into something that I don't understand. I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of attention. Emma was quiet for a moment, then spoke with a calmness that made Eleanor feel a little better. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Take your time, figure out what you want. But don't let fear hold you back. You've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, Eleanor. don't let it pass by. Eleanor took a deep breath, letting her friend's words settle in. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe this was the chance she had been waiting for. But she also knew that this journey was about more than just fame or fortune. It was about uncovering the truth behind her painting and the mystery that surrounded it. "Thanks, Emma," she said, feeling a sense of resolve starting to form. "I'll figure it out. I just need to think. Call me when you're ready to talk more." "I'm here for you," Emma replied before hanging up. Eleanor sat back, staring up at the stars now visible in the darkening sky. A part of her wanted to run away from it all, to return to the quiet life she had known, where she was just an artist with no expectations. But another part of her, one she hadn't known was there, wanted to embrace this new world. She had spent so many years painting in the shadows, never asking for recognition, but now that it had come, she wasn't sure what it would cost her. As she stood up from the bench, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Daniel. "I hope you've had time to think. We need to talk. There's more at stake than you realize. Meet me tomorrow at the gallery. I'll explain everything." Eleanor stared at the message for a long moment. She had been warned. But it was too late to turn back now. She had stepped into a world that was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. And there was no way out. She typed a quick response. "I'll be there." She hit send and then, for the first time that night, allowed herself to feel the weight of what was coming. Eleanor arrived at the gallery the following evening, her heart beating with a mix of anticipation and dread. The quiet hum of the city seemed far away, replaced by a deep sense of isolation as she walked toward the sleek, glass doors of the private gallery Daniel had mentioned. The name, Carrington Fine Arts, was embossed in gold letters on the door, a subtle yet undeniable marker of wealth and influence. She hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The inside was even more impressive than she had imagined, a large, minimalist space with pristine white walls and strategically placed lighting that highlighted the works of art on display. But it wasn't the paintings that held her attention. It was the feeling that hung in the air, a palpable sense of something important, something hidden, waiting to be uncovered. The gallery was empty, except for Daniel, who stood near a tall, imposing painting at the far end of the room. He turned as he heard her footsteps, his gaze steady and calm. "Eleanor," he greeted, his voice smooth, as always. "I'm glad you came." Eleanor nodded, a tight knot forming in her chest. "You said there was more to discuss. What's going on, Daniel? What exactly is hidden in my painting?" Daniel gestured for her to come closer. "Let's talk first. There's much more at play here than just a simple art auction. You're not the only one who's been watching your work." Eleanor frowned, following him across the polished floor. "What do you mean? Are you telling me someone else is interested in my paintings?" She couldn't mask the note of disbelief in her voice. She had always thought of herself as a nobody in the art world, a struggling artist trying to make ends meet. To hear Daniel speak as though her paintings were the subject of some larger game felt surreal. "Yes," Daniel said, stopping in front of the large painting on the wall. He motioned to it with a subtle wave of his hand. "It's not just about your paintings, Eleanor. It's about what you represent." Eleanor followed his gaze to the canvas, which was nearly as tall as she was. The artwork was abstract, much like hers, though with a more refined aesthetic. But what struck her was the sense of movement within it, like the brushstrokes were frozen in time, telling a story of a journey, of something in flux. It felt familiar, yet alien at the same time. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked, confused. "Is this one of your pieces?" Daniel shook his head, his eyes hardening. "No. This is a piece created by someone I've been following for a long time. Someone who's been a part of this world longer than either of us. And someone who has a very particular interest in your work." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "Who is it?" Before Daniel could respond, a voice interrupted from behind them. "It's me." Eleanor spun around to see a man walking toward them, a man in his early 40s, with sharp features and a commanding presence. He was dressed in an impeccable suit, his posture rigid as if he were always in control of the room. He had an air of power that made Eleanor instinctively step back. "This is Edward Montgomery," Daniel said, introducing the man with a wave. "He's the one I was telling you about." Eleanor's mind raced. Montgomery. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. She studied him carefully as he approached, his eyes scanning her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "Nice to finally meet you, Miss Harper," Montgomery said, his voice deep and controlled. He extended a hand, which Eleanor hesitated to take. She was still processing the shock of what was happening. The man who had just bought her painting wasn't the only one involved in this. There were others, people she didn't even know, watching her every move. "Why are you all so interested in my painting?" she asked, trying to mask the unease in her voice. "What is it about this piece that's so important?" Montgomery smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not just the painting itself, Miss Harper. It's the message behind it. And you, Eleanor, your role in this." Eleanor felt a wave of confusion wash over her. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What message? What role?" Daniel stepped forward, his expression serious now. "Your painting is part of a much bigger picture. Literally and figuratively. You see, Eleanor, your work, what you've created, isn't just art. It's a symbol, a piece of a puzzle that goes back much further than you realize." "Back further?" Eleanor echoed, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" Montgomery looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about your career, Eleanor. This is about legacy. About a secret that has been passed down through generations of artists, painters, sculptors, and visionaries. People who have hidden messages in their work, messages that can change the course of history." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "What secret? What do you mean?" Montgomery's lips curled into a slight smile. "Let me show you." He turned abruptly, walking towards a small door at the back of the gallery. Eleanor followed him, her legs feeling heavy with uncertainty. She had entered this gallery with questions, and now it seemed like those questions were only multiplying. The room behind the door was dimly lit, with only a single spotlight illuminating a series of old, weathered canvases. Montgomery motioned for her to come closer. "These are the paintings of the artist who began it all," he explained, his voice echoing in the silence of the room. "These pieces are from an artist who was lost to history. Someone whose work was so powerful that it attracted the attention of the wrong people." Eleanor stepped closer to one of the canvases. The brushstrokes were heavy, almost violent, the colors bleeding into each other like a chaotic storm. But there was something in the way the pieces were arranged, something hidden within the abstract forms that made Eleanor's pulse quicken. "What happened to this artist?" she asked softly. Montgomery's face hardened. "The artist disappeared. Just vanished. No one knew what happened to him. But his work remained. And those who understood it, who could read it, knew that his paintings held more than just art. They held power." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes wide. "Power? What are you saying?" "The paintings were a map," Montgomery said, his voice low and intense. "A map to something hidden. Something valuable. And you, Eleanor, are the key." Eleanor felt a chill settle over her. "I'm the key? What are you talking about?" Daniel stepped forward, his gaze fixed on her. "You don't know it yet, but your painting is connected to the others. You've created something that links all of it together." Eleanor felt her heart race, her breath shallow. "But I didn't intend for any of this. I just painted what I felt. I didn't know there was a message." Montgomery studied her carefully, as though assessing her every word. You may not have known, but you've been drawn into this whether you want to be or not. Your painting is the final piece of a puzzle that's been in the works for decades. And now, the people who understand its significance will stop at nothing to possess it. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Who are these people? Montgomery's lips curled into a dark smile. People with power. People who have been waiting for the right moment to strike. People who would do anything to control what your painting represents. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine as she realized the weight of what Montgomery was saying. Her painting wasn't just an artwork. It wasn't just a piece of her soul. It was part of something much larger, something that could change everything. But I don't want anything to do with this, Eleanor said, her voice shaking. I never asked for any of this. I just want to be an artist. I want to create, to live my life. Daniel's expression softened, but only slightly. You may not have asked for this, Eleanor, but you're in it now. And the only choice you have is how you play the game. Eleanor felt the weight of those words press down on her. She had no idea what she was walking into, but one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. Eleanor's head was spinning as she walked out of the private room, her mind overwhelmed with the weight of what Daniel and Montgomery had revealed to her. The gallery, which had once felt like a sanctuary for art, now seemed like a prison, a place where the walls had ears, and every corner hid a secret. She needed space to think, to breathe, but there was no escaping the reality of what she had stumbled upon. The words echoed in her mind, "You are the key." The phrase haunted her, pulling her deeper into a world that she didn't understand but was already a part of. How had she gone from an unknown artist, struggling to make ends meet, to a pawn in a game she had never asked to play? She couldn't process everything. The idea that her painting, something so deeply personal, was part of a hidden legacy, one that spanned decades, if not centuries, was too much to absorb in one go. Eleanor had always thought of her art as a way to express her emotions, her struggles, her inner world. But now, she was learning that her work had meaning far beyond anything she could have imagined. It wasn't just a painting. It was a piece of a much larger puzzle, a map that connected her to people with power, people who would stop at nothing to control its secrets. The city felt colder now. As Eleanor walked through the darkening streets, her footsteps echoed in the silence, each step feeling heavier than the last. The world around her seemed to be shifting, twisting, as if she were being drawn into something far bigger than herself. She needed answers, but she had no idea where to turn. The gallery had shown her that the art world was not what she thought it was. There were forces at play, hidden agendas, and people who would do anything to possess the power embedded in her painting. She turned a corner, her phone buzzing in her pocket, and she stopped, startled. It was a message from Emma. "You okay? I'm getting worried. You've been quiet all day. Call me when you can. Please." Eleanor's fingers trembled as she typed a quick response, trying to keep her voice calm, even though her heart was racing. "I'm fine. Just trying to process everything. I'll explain later." She hit send and stuffed the phone back into her bag. She couldn't tell Emma what was happening, not yet. She didn't even fully understand it herself. But she knew one thing, she was in over her head. Her mind kept returning to Montgomery's words. "It's a legacy, Eleanor. A secret that's been passed down through generations." What legacy? What secret? The chilling thought hit her like a punch to the stomach. What if her painting wasn't just a map to hidden power? What if it was also a weapon? And if it was a weapon, who was the enemy? The answer to that question came the following morning, when she received an unexpected visitor. Eleanor was sitting at her small kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee, when she heard a knock on her door. She hadn't been expecting anyone. Hesitantly, she stood up and walked toward the door, peering through the peephole. A man stood outside, his back to the door, dressed in a dark coat, his features obscured by the shadow of his hat. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. It was the man from the auction, the one who had mocked her painting. She had only seen him briefly, but the sharpness of his features and the arrogance in his expression were unforgettable. She opened the door slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The man turned at the sound of the door creaking open, his eyes locking with hers. A cold smile spread across his face. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I was hoping we could have a little chat." Eleanor took a step back instinctively, unsure of what was happening. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with unease. The man's smile widened, and he stepped forward, his presence imposing. "Let's just say I'm someone who understands the value of your work. And I think it's time you understood it too." Eleanor's pulse quickened as she scanned his face for any hint of what he wanted. "What do you mean?" "I don't have time for games." The man tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "No games, Miss Harper. I'm here to offer you a choice. You see, you've become part of something much larger than you ever imagined. Your painting is just the beginning. There are those who would do anything to possess what you've created. And then there are those who would destroy it to keep it hidden forever." Eleanor felt a chill sweep through her, her thoughts racing. "What are you talking about?" The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He handed it to her without a word. Eleanor took it cautiously, unfolding the paper. It was a rough sketch, but what it depicted made her blood run cold. It was an image of her painting, the one that had sold for $2 million, except this version was marked with strange symbols and geometric patterns, lines that seemed to shift and twist the image into something foreign. "This is a map," the man said softly. "A map that leads to something that has been hidden for centuries. And you, Miss Harper, are the key to unlocking it." Eleanor's stomach lurched. She had seen these symbols before, not in her own work, but in the paintings Montgomery had shown her at the gallery. The same strange markings, the same coded patterns. She felt a cold sweat form on the back of her neck. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice trembling. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped back and glanced around the hallway as if checking for someone. When he looked back at her, his face had hardened, the smile gone. "Let's just say I'm an ally of Mr. Montgomery. And I'm here to make sure you understand the consequences of what you've stumbled into." Eleanor's mind reeled. Mr. Montgomery? She had suspected that he was more than just a collector, but this was something else entirely. Was he involved with these people? The ones who had been searching for the hidden legacy she had unknowingly become a part of? "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The man's expression softened slightly, but there was no warmth in it. "I want to make sure you don't get caught in the crossfire. There are dangerous people involved in this, Eleanor. People who would do anything to control the power you've unlocked. And right now, you're sitting on top of a ticking time bomb." Eleanor felt the weight of his words. "So, what? You're telling me I'm in danger?" The man nodded. "Exactly. You've seen the sketch. You know what's at stake. Now it's up to you whether you walk away from this, or if you dive headfirst into a world where the rules don't apply, where power is the only thing that matters." Eleanor's breath came in shallow gasps. This was no longer just about her artwork. This was about survival. There were people out there, powerful people, who wanted what she had. And they wouldn't hesitate to do whatever it took to get it. The man paused for a moment, as though weighing his next words carefully. "You have a choice, Miss Harper. But be careful. There's no going back once you make it." Eleanor swallowed hard, her throat dry. "What's the choice?" The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You can give up the painting, disappear, and leave this all behind. Or you can embrace the power it holds. But be warned, those who seek it will not stop until they have it in their hands. The question is, will you fight to keep it? For a moment, Eleanor stood frozen, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. But deep down, she knew the answer. She wasn't the type of person who would walk away from something this important. She had fought her entire life to be seen, to be heard. And now, she was fighting for something much bigger than herself. I won't run, Eleanor said, her voice steady. I'm not going to let them take what's mine. The man's lips curled into a slight smile. Then get ready, Miss Harper. Because your life is about to change in ways you can't even imagine. The air felt thick with tension as Eleanor stood in her small apartment, staring at the piece of paper in her hands. The sketch, the strange symbols, and the cryptic warning from the man at the door echoed in her mind. The decision she had made the night before still weighed heavily on her. She wouldn't walk away. She wouldn't let the power hidden in her painting slip through her fingers. She would fight, no matter what it took. But as the hours ticked by, Eleanor couldn't shake the sense of impending doom that seemed to hover just beyond her reach. She had known danger existed, but now it felt real, tangible. The forces that had been after her painting, the legacy it carried, and the secrets it held were closing in. She had no illusions about what was at stake anymore. This was bigger than herself. Bigger than her art. It was about survival. The knock on her door came in the early evening. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat as she turned to face it. There was no mistaking who it was. She opened the door cautiously, her eyes meeting Daniel's, his face grim and determined. His usual calm demeanor was absent. There was something different about him now, something far darker. Eleanor, he said quietly, his voice urgent. We need to talk. Now. Eleanor stepped back, letting him in, though her instincts screamed that something was wrong. As Daniel entered, she noticed the unease in his posture, the way his gaze kept flickering toward the window. As if he were checking for something. Something, or someone. What's going on? Eleanor asked, her voice steady, though inside she was a storm of emotions. Daniel didn't immediately respond. He walked to the center of the room, then turned to face her, his expression serious. We don't have much time. Montgomery's people are already looking for you. They know you've refused to hand over the painting. And they're not going to stop until they get it. Eleanor's stomach churned at the mention of Montgomery. The man who had so carefully orchestrated this web, pulling her in with his promises and threats. The man who seemed to be controlling the entire game. I told you I wouldn't back down, Eleanor said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and resolve. I won't give it to them. It's mine. Daniel's expression softened, but only slightly. I understand. But this isn't just about the painting anymore, Eleanor. It's about what it represents. What you represent. Eleanor frowned. What do you mean? You're not just an artist anymore. You're a key player in something much larger than you can even imagine. Montgomery's people, they're not just collectors. They're part of an underground network, a group that controls vast resources. And they've been trying to control the power hidden in your painting for decades. Her heart pounded in her chest. The painting, what's in it? What power? Daniel's gaze hardened. That's what we need to uncover. It's not just a map, Eleanor. It's a guide, a blueprint to something that could change the balance of power in the world. The world's most influential figures have been after it for years, and you've unknowingly become the linchpin in their plan. Eleanor shook her head, feeling overwhelmed. But I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to paint. I just wanted to be seen. Daniel stepped closer, his voice softening. I know. But this was never about your art. It's about the message you've unlocked. The power behind your creativity. And now, they're coming for you. They won't stop until they get what they want. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. She had been warned, over and over again, but it wasn't until now that she fully understood the magnitude of what she had become involved in. The painting, the symbols, the legacy, it wasn't just a part of her personal story. It was a piece of history, a piece of the future. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The weight of her question hung in the air between them. Daniel paused, his eyes scanning the room as though searching for an answer in the very walls themselves. "We need to get ahead of them. We need to destroy the painting." Eleanor's heart stopped. "What?" "It's the only way to stop them," Daniel said urgently. "They've been chasing this painting for too long. If we destroy it, we destroy the only key they have. We erase their power." Eleanor stepped back, her mind reeling. "Destroy it? You want me to destroy my painting?" "I know it sounds insane," Daniel said, his voice low, almost pleading. "But it's the only way. If they get their hands on it, it's over. They'll use it to control everything. Your art will be twisted into something you never intended. You can't let that happen." Eleanor's mind spun as she struggled to comprehend what Daniel was asking of her. The painting had been her life's work, the one thing that had kept her going when everything else seemed to fall apart. It wasn't just a piece of art, it was a symbol of her resilience, her fight against the odds. It was everything she had worked for. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Daniel was right. The painting had power. And if Montgomery and his network got their hands on it, they would use it for purposes that could destroy everything she held dear. She had to make a choice. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't just destroy it." Daniel stepped forward, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "I know it's hard. But think about what it means. If you don't destroy it, they'll take everything from you. Your art, your freedom, your life. The only way to protect it is to eliminate the threat." Eleanor's hands trembled as she clutched the painting, staring at the vibrant colors that had once been a reflection of her soul. She had never imagined it would come to this, to a moment where the thing she loved most in the world might be the very thing that destroyed her. But Daniel was right. If she didn't act now, everything would be lost. With a heavy heart, she nodded. "All right. Let's do it." They didn't have much time. Daniel quickly packed up the painting and led her out of the apartment. They moved swiftly, avoiding the main streets and taking the narrow back alleys that twisted through the city. Eleanor's heart raced as they made their way toward a safe house Daniel had arranged. Somewhere far from the reach of Montgomery's people. The streets seemed more sinister now, the shadows stretching long as they walked, every step feeling like a march toward an uncertain fate. Eleanor couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into a trap, if everything was part of a larger plan. But it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice. She would protect herself. She would protect her art. When they reached the safe house, Daniel immediately set to work preparing the room. He placed the painting on a large table in the center, the canvas now covered by a sheet to conceal its identity. Eleanor stood back, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what they were about to do. "This is it," Daniel said quietly, his voice tinged with sadness. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." Eleanor nodded, her eyes fixed on the painting. It had been everything to her, and now, it would be nothing. With one final glance at the vibrant colors that had once been her life's work, Eleanor closed her eyes and turned away. Daniel took a deep breath and walked toward the canvas, the fire in his eyes unwavering. The flames would consume everything, everything that had once held power over her. The world was about to change, and with it, Eleanor's place in it. As the fire crackled and consumed the painting, Eleanor realized that she had not only destroyed a piece of art. She had destroyed the legacy, the threat, and the power that had been wielded over her. And in doing so, she had taken back control of her own life. The flames burned bright, but Eleanor felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had made the right choice. The world would never know the full story behind the painting. But for Eleanor, that didn't matter. She had found her freedom. And in the ashes of her work, she had found herself.